Eric, how's it going today?
It's going great. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. And we are here to talk about the Mulligan. What can you tell us about this film? Take us through a little synopsis.
Well, it's the backdrop is around the game of golf, but it's not about golf. It's about life and about the journey of several characters in this movie, including the character I play, Paul McAllister. Um, and Paul is on a path in his life that unfortunately is leaving a bit of a wake of destruction behind him. And he's estranged from his son. He's been separated from his wife for about 5 years, and he's a bit lost. His head is focused on his career. He's building a big Fortune 500 company, and so he thinks he's doing the right thing, but he's clearly a workaholic and he's very competitive. He's got a big ego, and sadly, it's costing his relationships. And he runs into a guy at this golf tournament, per the advice of a professional golfer. After my character Paul McAllister, behaved badly, and he ends up getting this advice. Hey, you need to go see this guy, Old Pro. He might be able to help you out. And that character, Old Pro, is played by Pat Boone. So my character goes and meets him, and then through that relationship, Paul goes on a journey of discovery and comes to learn that in life, there are rules and there are consequences for our actions, but he also learns that you can get second chances, and he ultimately realizes that through God and his relationship with Christ. So that's the story right there, kind of in a nutshell. And then, I don't want to give everything away, but you can kind of imagine where it goes from there.
Yeah, no, I love that this is a movie about second chances, which I think is something today that is kind of lost in culture. We don't talk a lot about second chances. I feel like we kind of have a punish culture. You make a mistake, and of course you got to pay. When you make a mistake, you got to pay for it, right? That's life. But the reality of being able to have that second chance, being able to go out there and try again, and giving people grace, and the fact that everything you just described, about the characters here and what they go through, the fact that they get that second chance. What for you attracted you to the script when you first heard about the project?
Well, so it's kind of a cool story. A couple years ago, now I'm going to say close to 3 years ago, I was doing a movie in Georgia, and one of the producers is a guy named Rodney Eldridge, and Rodney and I were playing golf together, and he said, hey, my dad, Rick Eldridge, is developing a story based on a book called The Mulligan. And he said, would you be interested? You would be right for the lead character. And I said, yeah, if it comes into play at some point, I'd be interested. So 2 years later, I get the call from Rodney's dad, Rick, and says, hey, we'd love to cast you in this movie. So they sent me the script. He said, and I knew it had to do with golf. I said, absolutely, that sounds great. And then he told me it was based on this book, The Mulligan. And I know the guy who wrote the book, Wally Armstrong. I met him years ago at a fellowship golf event. And so it was all just kind of coming together. God had orchestrated the timing of it and everything. I love the game of golf. It's a great passion of mine. And so I thought, okay, cool. I can be in a movie and play some golf. And it has this amazing message. And when I read the script, I just thought, who is not going to identify with not only what these characters are going through, the challenges in their relationships, the broken relationships that find healing, but also everybody needs a second chance. And sometimes more than just once. Yeah. And I just loved the message. And I thought, wow, if I could be a part of this and hit a few golf balls while I'm doing it, it'll be an amazing experience. And it turned out to be that way.
Yeah. And this is a Fathom release. It's coming to theaters April 18th. Now, so let me ask you, yeah. and 19th, 18th and 19th. What for you mentioned God, obviously. This is a movie that has a faith message. Do you often get to work on these kinds of projects?
Not a lot, but in the recent years, I actually have had a chance to work on some really cool films with faith messages in them, and with really powerful messages. I did a war picture called Indivisible, and it followed the life of a chaplain and his wife, true story, and just how, he was idealistic and went into the military thinking I'm just going to go and share God with everybody and everything's going to be rosy. And then he saw the realities of war, and it really affected him, and it almost cost him his marriage and in his health. And he went through that same kind of journey to come back to God and see God God's in the midst of the mess of the world. He's right there, just saying, "Hey, I'm here. You're not lost. Just fix your eyes on me." And so I love doing these kind of stories, and I think they, the world's hungry for them, especially right now after what we've been through the last couple of years. I think a lot of people are kind of reassessing like what's important. I talked to someone yesterday, a young person who was kind of really hard driving. They got out of college and was working really hard to climb the ladder and be successful, and then the pandemic hit, and suddenly nothing's in your control. And I think it caused this person to kind of reflect on life, like what's really important, and there's that scripture. It says, what profits a person to gain the whole world and lose their soul, in the sense that, this world offers so many things that can just pull you in so many different directions. And then you achieve it or attain that or this, and then suddenly you're still empty, and you think, wow, that didn't really fulfill me like I thought it would. Yeah. And so then it's like, well, what else is out there? And really, you get to the point where you realize nothing really fills that God hole in our souls, other than God.
Yeah, you could just keep chasing things and following the lie, right? The lie is that, we talk a lot about big lies. The biggest lie is that you're going to find that hope. You're going to fill that hole somewhere else, and it's interesting hearing you say these things as an actor. And of course, this is the stereotype, right? That being in Hollywood, it's very hard to be a Christian in Hollywood. I know a lot of Christians in Hollywood, and people of faith in Hollywood, but speak to that a little bit, because it is interesting, as we talk about distractions in life, right? We're coming off of the pandemic, not just distractions, but difficult things. We went into a war now, right? You've got the Ukraine situation. It's just been one thing after another. And then you have the everyday distractions, and Hollywood does seem like a place where a lot of those temptations, right? Fame and money, if they're not kept in check, that could actually be a very difficult thing for a person of faith. I'd love to just hear from you as somebody who's been in the industry.
Well, on the basic level, earning a good living, making money, if you have a certain level of fame, any of those kind of things, they're not bad in themselves. I mean, they can be used for good. When people have a platform, they can use that platform to reach other people, or their opinion will maybe matter, where someone will listen and tend to lean forward a little bit and go, oh, what do they have to say? Resources financially, you can support charities that you're bold on, and ministries, and you can help people. And so I think those are good things. But when those things become self-serving, and you think that those are going to really fulfill you and bring you pleasure, then, we see it all the time. People come to a realization, they say, wow. I mean, you've heard, Jim Carrey talk about the price of fame, and a lot of these people that they go, wow, it's not what I thought it would be.
We see it in churches too, by the way. It's not just
absolutely.
It's easy to pinpoint Hollywood and say, because that's sort of the, the shiny thing that everyone sees. But we see it happen in churches. We see it happen everywhere. It could happen to really any of us. Yeah. And
it's happened to pastors, where pastors, pastors can be really vulnerable. You talk about, you'll see these titans of the faith, these guys who committed their life to ministry, who fall. They fall from grace and make poor decisions, or they get caught up in the fame of being a great orator. And so no one's immune to the trappings of the world, for sure.
Well, and you said it when you said it's about, when you become self-serving, everything you're doing becomes about the self. That's when you fall into that hole, and that could happen again to anybody. But any attention that is on you, if you don't point that attention back to where it should go, which would be Christ, right? Then that can really be a scary thing. It could be a damaging thing for a person in any position. So it's interesting to me, because I don't actually know your backstory of how you got into Hollywood. What was your journey into the entertainment industry?
Well, I was in college at USC, and while I was studying abroad for a semester, I was in Spain. I was kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do after graduation, and a friend of mine was going into the movie business, and we talked extensively about it during our time in Madrid. And I just thought, boy, I really love storytelling. I love going to the movies. And I had done a little bit of acting. I'd done some stage acting in school, and I really enjoyed it. So I thought, okay, when I get back, I'm going to dive all in. And so I started taking film classes at USC while I was getting my major. And then people started asking me if I'd act in their student films. And I thought, oh, okay, that'd be fun. So while I was doing that, I was still kind of focused on the production side, wanting to be a director. And when I graduated, I was, on that path. And through a series of events, I ended up booking some national commercials, and I was a SAG member. And so I thought, well, maybe God's called me in a different direction. And so I took a class called The Business of Acting at UCLA, the competition, from a guy named Michael Tucci. And Michael taught this class. And through that class, I met Howard Fine, who's a very well-known acting teacher in Los Angeles and really now all over the world. He teaches in Australia and different places. And I contacted him, and he invited me into his studio, and I started studying full time with Howard Fine. And then I got a lead in a play, and I just kept cooking along from there, because I didn't know anybody when I got into the business. I didn't know a soul. So it was really just about meeting people, making relationships. And I will say this, before anything happened for me in Hollywood, I had a really kind of a profound moment. I had graduated from college, and I was sitting in my apartment, and I felt kind of empty. I was just kind of lost. I was out in the real world. And I just remembered saying, God, I don't know if you want to have anything to do with me, but I miss you. Because as a younger man in my early teens, I had committed my life to Christ, but then kind of fell away. And so I just, God wasn't a priority in my life. Let's put it that way. And I knew he was there, but I wasn't making him number one. And so when I said that prayer, I just said, I don't know if you want to have anything to do with me, but I miss you. That's all I said. And Billy, from there, my life just transformed. It was just, I don't have any other way to describe it other than it was just supernatural. And I could just sense a change, and my focus shifted, and my career took off. I started meeting people, doors were open. I mean, that first play I'm telling you about, I auditioned for a small role, like a sword bearer in a play. I was like, I haven't been on stage in a long time. I just needed to see if I could get up on stage and not freak out. So I auditioned for this tiny role, and I go home and I get a phone call from the director, and he says, hey, you came in and auditioned for me today for this role. And I said, yeah, did I get the job? And he says, no, he says, but I'd like you to be the lead in my play.
Wow.
And so
that doesn't just happen.
No,
I mean, that's that.
No,
right.
No. And so I took the lead role, and then through that I got an agent, and then the ball started rolling from there. And, it's been an incredible journey. But my point of telling you that story is God got a hold of me in the beginning. And I'm so grateful for that, because I could, I'll be honest with you. I think that knowing that if I didn't have that happen in my life, I don't know where I would be today and what my life would look like had God not been the focus. That's for me. It been the focus for me when my career started out and when I started to experience a certain level of success.
Well, and you answered a couple of other questions. I was going to ask you when faith sort of became, when your entrance to faith was. It sounds like it was your teen years, you fell away, and then you had that moment. And that's a really pivotal moment. I don't know if you want anything to do with me, God, but here I am. And then God taking your life and you letting God use your life, because I think that's the thing that people really struggle with, right? It's easy to say, okay, I accept Jesus, I'm going to be a follower of Christ, but actually letting God, and that I've struggled with that a lot in the past, right? And just in the last couple of years, being able to say, wherever you want to take me, God, today, go for it, right? Once you do that, everything changes, and it's amazing to watch. And it sounds like that's your journey.
It is my journey. And, it was, I have, a few memories from college, and I had a great time in college, but there were some times I remember, like one time Campus Crusade for Christ was having a meeting in our fraternity house, and some of my fraternity brothers were in there. And I remember standing at the door having this pull on my heart to go in and join them. But I was thinking, that's not cool. Everybody might think I'm not cool or whatever it was. But there was a longing to be a part of that.
Yeah.
And I remember walking off. I remember walking across the USC campus one time, and there was a church on campus. And I went to the church and I thought, man, maybe I should start going to church. So clearly God was calling me. But he was patient with me and knew that he already knew. He knew eventually I'd come to my senses and come around and be like, okay, I got to get my priorities straight here. But there was always that pull. And I also know that God's promises are true, that he says, I'll never leave you and never forsake you. So even though I had already welcomed him into my life as a young man, he knew I needed to take a journey like a prodigal son and then come back. And so that's why I love that prodigal son story. But that's Legends of the Fall is that movie, it's like the prodigal son story is awesome, and Brad Pitt's character is the prodigal son. So, I didn't go as crazy as the prodigal son in the Bible story, but
but you went off the path, right? Yeah. You went off and
yeah.
I think that's incredible. Do you ever find it hard? And I'll just leave it there. Do you ever find it hard or difficult to talk about your faith being in Hollywood?
No. I'll tell you, okay. First of all, I will say to people out there, a lot of times they ask me like, wow, what's it like to be in that Hollywood, that dark place? And I said, Hollywood's not unlike any other industry. I mean, it's out and it's in your face because you're watching people and actors, but Hollywood, I've actually met so many amazing people, and it's provided an incredible life for me. The career working in the entertainment industry, which I think it includes the faith-based films too, the Christian films. It's the entertainment industry, and I've met so many amazing people. And in my experience in over 30 years in this career, I have not faced any kind of backlash or resistance to my faith. I try to be open about it, but I don't try to force things on people. I just try to share this is my story. This is my testimony. This is who I am. And I found that especially one-on-one, people are really open to having a dialogue and talking about it.
Yeah.
I have friends I've made that are atheists, and we have these amazing conversations about God. And it's really, and they're not like, get out of the car. They're like, we engage, we have these great conversations. And so I have found that in my experience, it hasn't been a negative thing, and it hasn't been hard for me to talk about. And in fact, I don't think he would mind me telling this story, but Charles Eston, who I worked with on Nashville, he's now on Outer Banks, but we ran into each other years and years ago. We've known each other for 30 years. We ran into each other at a industry event, and we were talking, and this conversation came up, and I said, well, being in Hollywood as a Christian, and I was just talking about it, and in his mind, he was thinking, wow, that is so awesome. I love how bold he just was about, not apologizing that he was a Christian, and he doesn't know he doesn't know what my faith is, and he's obviously a believer too. We're in a Bible study together, which is cool, but so I've never really had any real issue about it. And then, as a matter of fact, the producer of a movie I just worked on just texted me the other day, and he said, and I'm not going to say who the actor was, but he said, I had so-and-so in the studio the other day, and he said, and your name came up, and we were talking about it. And this actor said to this friend of mine who's a producer, he says, gosh, he says, every time I think about Eric Close, it just makes me want to go to church. So,
but a lot of that's about you and the way you treat people too. And I think that's a lot of this too, right? When you're living out love God, love others, right? And you've got that truth and love balance, and you're doing it right. That's the kind of reaction people are going to have, that you make him think of that, right? Like that is a good legacy to have.
I think so. I mean, I guess it's better than them saying, oh, every time I think about Eric Close, I want to drink.
Well, yeah, it's definitely better than that. Definitely.
Yeah. But so, look, I can tell you, there's been times I've said the wrong thing. And there's times we have to ask forgiveness. And I know there's been times, in my walk where I've had to go to someone and say, "Hey, I'm sorry if I offended you in any way, or
Sure.
I was out of line, or whatever that is." And because we all fall short, and so
Yeah,
I'm
you're guilty of being a
grateful.
human. You're
Yeah,
guilty of
I'm
being a
great.
human.
That's why I'm grateful for second chances and forgiveness and redemption and grace and mercy.
Well, and that brings us back to the Mulligan, which again, it's hitting theaters April 18th and 19th. It's a Fathom release. And Eric, I got to have you back again because there's a lot more to unpack here. It was great getting to
Absolutely.
talk to you and getting to hear your story. Thanks for joining us.
Of course. No, I'm excited about the film, and I really hope that people can just feel entertained. It's a film that they can go with their family, and they don't feel like they have to cover the kids' eyes, and it has a really wonderful message and a redemptive message in it. And I think if I would be happy if just even one person saw that film and went home and thought, I need to make amends with my son or my daughter, or I need to kind of restructure some things so I can make it to my kid's soccer game, or I'd really like to take my wife on a date. We haven't been on a date in a long time, or vice versa. The wife says, I really need to pay more attention to my husband and go on a date with him, whatever that is. But I hope relationships are mended because of this, and that people realize that God loves them and really wants to be in a relationship with them.
I love that. Well, what a great way to conclude our time together. Appreciate you coming on today.
You bet. Thanks so much for your time.